So we are in chapter 20 in your world history, and we're going to be talking about the Victorian era, England's age of progress, 1837 to 1901. England in the 19th century and the growth of the British Empire and the beginning of Britain's decline. So we're going to talk about this time, this Victorian area with Queen Victoria there. You can see how England back in that time, and down here in the corner is a school during that time. So let's begin. England takes the lead. This is a quote by James Fenimore Cooper in 1838, and he says, "England stands at the head of modern civilization as a whole, although many countries surpass in particular parts. The higher tasted of England are not as refined and cultivated perhaps as those of Italy and France, but the base of society is infinitely more advanced." So basically saying how England during this time was even more advanced than Italy and France. England in the 19th century. England was rapidly becoming a world power. It was the wealthiest country in Europe after the Industrial Revolution. And British Navy reigned supreme on the high seas. The British Empire had dominion of many lands around the world. The Wesleyan revivals had touched the hearts of the people, leading to reform of morals, and missionary efforts were on the go there. While most of Europe was having violent revolutions, England was building one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen. So here we have, from the Wesleyan revival, people coming to the Lord and wanting to live moral lives. And we see God actually, how he was blessing England during this time, the Victorian era. There were great English statesmen during this time. The British monarchy showed signs of decay with George III, George IV, and William IV, and that weakened the power of the monarch. So even though the kings were very weak kings, they had some great statesmen. In the meantime, competent statesmen ran the government, providing sound leadership for the nation in spite of these weak kings. I think that's King George, so George IV. William Pitt the Younger. Well, William Pitt lived 1759 to 1806, and he was a member of the Parliament and Prime Minister during the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars, of when Napoleon was fighting against, Napoleon of France was fighting against England. He had bold diplomacy and wise economic policies. Here's a picture when he was pretty young. William Pitt the Younger. The Duke of Wellington was popular in 1769 to 1852. Those are the years he lived. He was a famous hero of the Napoleonic Wars. In fact, at the Battle of Waterloo, he's known for that battle with Napoleon, where England won. He became the commander-in-chief of the military and later served as a prime minister between 1828 and 1830. That's the Duke of Wellington. Sir Robert Peel lived 1788 to 1850, and he served England in several capacities. He was in the Parliament, in the Cabinet, and he also served 2 terms as Prime Minister. And he founded the London Metropolitan Police Force. And the police officers of that time were called bobbies or peelers, after Robert Peel, Sir Robert Peel. The Victorian age, England's longest reigning monarch for the longest period of time. So anyway, we know that this was Queen Victoria here, and she lived 1819 to 1901. And she became queen because she was King William IV's niece. So she was just 11 years old when she found out she would be the next ruler. And at that time, she resolved that her reign would be totally different than the other kings, and different from King William's reign. She said, "I will be good." At 18 years old, William died, and she was queen. She would become the longest ruling monarch in the English history. 64 years she reigned, and she kept her childhood resolution during that time, saying, I will be good to be good. And she's changed the people's view of a monarchy from disdain under the Georges and under William. People were pretty upset with them at times, but they respected Victoria. The greatness of Victorian England, like she ruled 1837 to 1901. You can see a picture in her later years there. She was compared to Queen Elizabeth I for expansion and knowledge and wealth and the territorial domain for high achievements. England became the leading country in the whole world during the Victorian era. It covered the quarter of the whole globe, including they reigned over Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, South Africa, and many parts of Africa, Asia, and Americas, and the Pacific. Many parts of Africa, Asia, Americas, and Pacific. So that's the area. So you can see here on the map, you can see these areas. The British Empire had dominion over some of these areas. Now, of course, we have this area now, and of course North America, not at that time, but actually this area, Canada. See the pink area is the British Empire here, so you can see where India, Australia, the Indies, down here, let's see, in South Africa, parts of Africa, some parts of the Indies and such down into South America here, and of course Canada. So the saying was, during the Victorian age, the sun never sets on the British Empire. That means the British Empire controlled areas of both the East and West hemispheres. So when the sun was going up on one hemisphere, on the other hemisphere was going down. The sun never sets on the British Empire. It was so large at that time. The policy of free trade and honesty and prosperity and progress. So England was the leading manufacturing nation of that time, the wealthiest country in the entire world. It also was its world's banker. The world's bankers were from England. And English pound, the sterling, was the standard for international commerce at that time. The British merchants carried half of the trade of the entire world. And the British scientists made astounding discoveries during this time. So a lot of advances happened and prospered England at this time. Queen Victoria speaks to the African prince. So the prince asked, what is the key to England's success? Victoria did not show him the glittering crown jewels, or to observe the great industrial cities, or hear the brilliant orators in the parliament. Instead, she presented the prince with a Bible and said, here is the secret of England's success, the Bible. And now the prince from India recognized this truth. He said, where did the English people get their intelligence and energy and cleverness and power? It is their Bible that gives them this to them. And now they'll bring it to us and say, this is what raised us. Take it and raise yourself. So I just love that how Victoria, she presented the Bible when they asked of her success, a true Christian. Victoria and Albert. Well, in 1840, Victoria married Prince Albert of Germany. He was the prince called the Prince Consort. And they had this model marriage, inspired many people with their marriage. In fact, they had 9 children, 4 sons and 5 daughters. And Albert encouraged the queen practically all the time, and he also was the king's political advisor, and he was deeply involved in domestic and international affairs with the queen. So he helped Queen Victoria a lot. In 1861, Queen Victoria was very shaken because Prince Albert died. And she mourned mournfully retreated to her castle and seldom was seen for years. So she basically was so upset that she didn't want to go in public because she missed him so much. Political reforms happened during this time. Queen Victoria knew when to rely upon the parliamentary leaders. She knew she had to rely on them and she couldn't take everything under her own accord. England became more democratic as more people were included in the political process. The population of the cities had grown, so the representation in the House of Commons was needed to be updated. And also, the suffrage, the right to vote, was granted to the middle-class males, working-class males, and all adult males by 1832, 1867, and 1884. And then, of course, not until 1918 did women receive the right to vote. And that was after the Queen had died. But here we have votes. I like this picture of England votes for women, that women now could vote. There were two guys, statesmen that were in the parliament at this time. And one was a liberal and one was a conservative. The middle class of the industrial age and nobility and wealthy were usually considered more the conservatives. Well, this was William Gladstone and Benjamin Disraeli. So both of them switched their party affiliations and alternated as prime minister. They were both good prime ministers. William Gladstone, 1809 to 1898, that's when he lived, he was called the Grand Old Man. He was very religious and a great orator. That means spoke. He was a great speaker, and he was responsible for political and social reforms. He was the one statesman to whom the oppressed peoples could turn to in hope. So he gave hope to the poor. That was William Gladstone. On to Benjamin Disraeli. He was a Jewish descent, and he swung from liberalism and he became a conservative in the Conservative Party. He sponsored certain reforms for the masses. He lived in 1804 to 1881. He was regarded by the Queen because the Queen loved his humor and praised him, and he was very good to the Queen. And he returned Victoria to London following her years of seclusion after the prince's death. So when she was mourning and she felt like she couldn't come out, finally Benjamin Disraeli went and brought her out into the public. Kind of looks like Bob Dylan, huh? Oh, okay. The great preachers of England. Okay, I am going to stop there because we're going to get into now the missionaries and preachers, and that's going to take another video. So amazing what's going on during this Victorian age.